he's been kind of a model for me of somebody who does their job cheerfully, humbly, and very competently. So I'm glad to introduce him. Dick and his wife Margaret were involved in facilitating and consulting for the UNA Literacy and Translation Project in Papua, Indonesia. The New Testament was published in 2007, and the whole Bible was published in 2022. During that time, Dick found time to also earn a PhD from the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, and his topic was biblical metaphors, particularly the shepherd metaphor. And if you have not read that dissertation and you're interested in metaphors, I highly recommend it. I profited a lot from it. Later on, he also earned a doctorate in theology from the Christian University of Papua in Sorong, focusing on the exegesis of Psalm 91 and the relationship of faith and fear of powers of darkness among the Una people in Papua. Besides the academic endeavors, he was also the SIL Asia Area Translation Coordinator and later the SIL International Translation Coordinator, and then the SIL International Coordinator for Translation Research and Practice. He is now consulting for 3 translation projects, as well as teaching translation principles at IBLT, the Whole World Institute in Jerusalem, and at the Christian University of Tomohon in Indonesia. And he is associate researcher of missiology at the Department of Theology of the University of Apeldoorn in the Netherlands. So, Dick, I don't know how you do it. I get exhausted just reading all that, but thank you. And thank you for sharing from your experience and your insights in this presentation, which will be on the topic of responding to ethical issues in and around Bible translation, challenges, principles, and guidelines. Please, let's welcome Dr. Dick Kroneman.
Well, good morning. Oh, I have an echo here. I may need some help to turn the sound off. Which one do I need to turn off here? But there's an echo. Oh. We thought we had a technology in place, but it's always private.
Zoom. Here we go. Right. One, two. One, two. I don't know. I think that's muted. And this is muted. It's coming through speakers. Zoom muted. Zoom does not help. Turn this all the way down. So even though So, like that.
Okay, I now use my PowerPoint back.
Thank you. That's all. Okay.
Good morning. Okay, and thank you for your help. We thought we had the technology under control, but there's always surprises. And I hope that my presentation will not put you to sleep. So the topic of my paper and presentation is responding to ethical issues in and around Bible translation, challenges, principles, and guidelines. As Bible translators and translation consultants, we place a high value on a careful study of key terms in the Bible and key terms in the culture. And in light of this, it's a bit ironic that when we discuss topics like ethics in translation, we often assume that we and everyone else know what we're talking about and that we agree on what the meaning of those concepts is. And we often forget to study and to define the concepts that we are using in our discussions. In my paper, I make an attempt to define concepts like ethics and ethical issues before I discuss recommended responses to ethical issues in and around Bible translation. So this is an attempt at definition, and I'm very much interested to hear from you if you have additional insights in how these concepts should be defined, because it makes a big difference how we define those concepts. In my paper, I suggest that ethics in and around Bible translation needs to be an ethics of reflection, dialogue, and mediation. First, I define the concept of ethical issues, ethical dilemmas, and ethics in general. Second, I discuss Andrew Chesterman's proposed ethics of commitment. Third, I present 1 out of 4 case studies. Fourth, I summarize lessons learned from this case study, and I conclude with a summary of recommended principles and guidelines. And we'll see how far I get in my presentation. Here's an overview of the paper. First of all, translation takes place in intercultural workspaces. We work with colleagues from other cultures. This often implies that opposing values are at work. For example, how do we deal with a coworker who does not function well? Do we fire that person or do we keep that person? Are we guided by values of honesty, compliance, and productivity? And are we task-oriented? In that case, we might fire that person or try to fire that person. However, if we are guided by values of respect, patience, and compassion, and if we have a relational mindset, we try to keep that person. The higher order question is, how do we deal with different value orientations? Are there any universal ethical principles that can guide us in these situations? The concept of ethical issues plays an important role in the study of ethics. Ethics can be described as a field of study that deals with competing moral values. People from different cultures, traditions, and lifestyles may have different moral values, or they may have shared values but rank them in a different way. Also, as individuals, we often find ourselves in situations where we have to choose between competing moral values. Not every value is necessarily a moral value, and not every value has the same weight. Moral values are values that have a direct and significant impact on the integrity and well-being of ourselves and of other people. So I'd like to discuss the key terms ethical dilemma and ethical issue. I'd like to propose that every ethical dilemma is an ethical issue. However, not every ethical issue is an ethical dilemma. For example, in ethical dilemmas, the stakes are high, they occur under highly constrained conditions. The agents have to choose between 2 options with bad consequences. And very often, a sacrifice may be needed in order to solve the issue. For example, the lifeboat dilemma. If you have 25 people on a sinking ship, there's only 1 lifeboat and there's place for only 10 people, how do you solve that issue? If everyone will be on the lifeboat, everyone will drown. So you have to make very difficult choices. Whose life will be saved? That is an ethical dilemma. The situation is very much constrained. However, ethical issues in the broader sense of the word occur in challenging situations, but they do not necessarily have the same limitations as ethical dilemmas. There may be an acceptable third or fourth alternative. It's true that different people may have different perspectives, but they are not internally torn between two alternatives, like in the lifeboat example. For example, the unproductive coworker, there are more options than just firing that person or keeping that person. We may try to give that person a second chance with a warning, or we may try to find another role for that person. So there's more than one option in addition to the two choices in a dilemma, which suggests that there are only two if it is a dilemma. So what is ethics? There are various definitions of ethics. I'd like to propose that ethics is about taking responsible action. It's doing the right thing at the right time, for the right reasons, in the right ways, and in a specific context. However, it's not always clear what the right thing is. Life is messy, contexts are diverse, and situations can be complex. And in many situations, more than one responsible course of action may be appropriate or acceptable. I'd like to propose an expanded definition of ethics. So ethics is doing the right thing at the right time, for the right reasons, in the right way, in a specific context, and guided by careful reflection. It's not just about action, it's about why are we doing this and how are we doing this? And it needs to be followed by critical self-reflection and by respectful dialogue. We need to talk with one another, what is the ethical thing to do? So what is ethics all about? It's about being involved in responsible action. It's about honest reflection, and it's about respectful dialogue. It's not just following a moral code based on divine command, on culture, tradition, or innovation. It implies a reasoned and a reasonable approach. It involves a careful, balanced examination of alternative courses of action in light of identity-related norms, values, and virtues. So there's a prescriptive element, what should be done? But there's also a descriptive element, what are the underlying norms, values, and virtues? There's also the reflective element, why is something prescribed, forbidden, or allowed? Dialogical, what can we learn from others who live by different standards? And it's also formative, how can we integrate ethics in education, training, and mentoring, and in our case, the training and mentoring of translators and consultants? It's very important to integrate that in our studies. So we have ethical imperatives, ethical prohibitives, purposes and motivations. How do we rank norms, values, and virtues? We have situational constraints and limitations. We have to think about intended and unintended consequences, and we need to be open-minded and have ethical sensitivity in dialoguing with others. Ethics covers the middle ground between law and habits, and it's important in situations where there are no clear rules and guidelines, and where different values or virtues compete with one another. Believe it or not, but ethics is not always a good thing. Ethics can be abused. Practicing ethics, both in general life ethics and in professional ethics, is not a matter of making ethical claims or telling everyone what they should be doing. The core aspect of ethics is a sensitive and critical reflection on actions that have a positive or negative impact on the lives of people we live with and work with. Whenever we engage in discussing ethical imperatives and prohibitives, we need to keep in mind the ethics of doing ethics and focus on critical self-reflection. Are we listening to the other, to any other? So who is the other? It's very easy to recognize someone with a different skin color as the other. But very often we forget that there are more others than just the ones that appear to be others. And so we need to look at our brothers and sisters that are much closer. They are also the other. So the other is, who is the other? It's actually any person. And so this is very important that we think about, are we listening to the other any other, not just a selected other, but any other. And are we demonstrating respect, even if we disagree? You know, it's easy to talk about respect. We need to respect one another. But if you and I have an argumentation about theology or about culture or about translation, it's so easy to just say, okay, it's my way, and not really respect them, even though they may have different perspective. So very important moral values, fairness, righteousness, justice, and the list goes on. It's a long list. So ethics is a way of thinking critically and systematically about actions and priorities, the impact that impact the integrity and well-being of other people and ourselves. It's about defining the relationship between means and ends. The ends do not justify the means. The means need to be justifiable in and of themselves. It also implies awareness of the principle that abuse of a certain practice, including ethics, does not cancel its proper use. Translation. So ethics in and around translation. Translation is a values-driven activity. Translation principles embody values with accuracy, clarity, naturalness, acceptability. Don't forget beauty and consistency. We are also relating to different stakeholders. We have authors, we have texts, we have commissioners, we have the receptor community, funders, professional peers, our own conscience. Whose perspective or what principles do we prioritize if there are conflicting norms, values, and interests? Some examples of ethical issues in translation. Do we translate Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, My Struggle? Or do we translate the Old Testament to stories about polygamy, incest, rape, and genocide? Yes, we translated the whole Old Testament, but you need to also think about the risk. What are the risks of including those stories? Also, what's the role of AI in Bible translation? It's the captain, the co-pilot, the autopilot, the flight follower, or the mechanic. We need to consider the possible impact of our actions and decisions. Is it a yes? Is it a no? Or is it yes, but only if specific risk mitigating conditions are in place? And if that is required, what are those? So ethics in life trumps ethics in translation. It's more important to save a person's physical life in case someone is drowning than translating an extra verse or paragraph. Okay, I'm coming to Andrew Chesterman. He wrote a very interesting and a very insightful article in 2014. It's called Proposal for a Hieronymic Oath. He proposes two principles of ethics in general. He discusses 4+1 models of translation ethics. And he proposes the hieronymic oath, so an oath for translators based on the Saint Jerome, the patron of translators, that, okay, it's important that the way we translate, okay, we do it in a way that is responsible. I like the fact that professional ethics is embedded in general life ethics. Translation in general cannot be separated from ethics around translation. So his basic two principle ethical principles are: don't go around hurting each other and seek to understand things. I'd like to propose that we add a positive, do good to other people. So adding love your neighbor, foster human flourishing for others and for yourself. The positive value needs to be added. Bad things may happen when good people do nothing. So we can do harm by doing nothing. We can commit sins of omission. Compare the parable of the Good Samaritan. So Chesterman has four models of ethics in translation. First of all, the ethics of representation that emphasizes the source author's intention. So it's very important to be accurate in your translation. Okay, then the ethics of service emphasizes the service performed for a client. The ethics of communication focuses on representing the other, and norm-based ethics emphasizes following socially accepted expectations. These models have a downside, according to Chesterman. They are incompatible and different in ranges and applications. However, I would propose that these models still do reflect the diversity of value orientations among translators Bible translators included, and we cannot avoid conflicts of values anyway in the intercultural workspace. Chesterman proposes a fifth model based on virtues, not on values. So he proposes a translation ethics of commitment, focusing on fairness, truthfulness, trustworthiness, empathy, courage, and determination. Now, I would add these are indeed important virtues, but these virtues are actually embodied values. So there is a close connection between values and virtues anyway. But still, I think this is a very good model. I'm going to skip the proposed hieronymic oath. We can discuss that later if you are interested. I have 4 case studies, but I'm not going to present those in the next 6 or 7 minutes that are left. In my paper, so first of all, I discussed the application of translation principles in Una Bible translation, then dealing with the killing of alleged sorcerers in Langda, Papua, Indonesia, balancing competencies and experience in consultant training and ethical issues related to the introduction of innovations. In this presentation, I will limit my discussion to the first case. So how do we, so this is about the Una translation project, which we started back in 1988 as facilitators and later as consultants. So we were dealing with 4 different stakeholders. First of all, we had the commissioners of the translation, the GJRP Church and the NRC Mission. They favored a faithful, literal translation, comparable to the Dutch Statenvertaling, which is very much comparable to the King James Version, or the Indonesian Terjemahan Baru. Then we had the receptor audience. They clearly needed and appreciated a clear and natural, functional equivalent translation in oral style, both in print and audio format. Then we had the publisher, the Indonesian Bible Society. They allowed functional equivalent translations as long as you don't overdo it. You need to be very careful, when you make things explicit. You only do that when you really need to do that. And then my wife and I, as translation facilitators, we highlighted the needs of the receptor audience, mediation and transparency. We try to demonstrate a need for this approach based on practical examples. So we had to interact with the various stakeholders. And we proposed that since the Una people would be the most affected by the translation, their value orientation should be prioritized, even though the other stakeholders had a much more conservative perspective on what Bible translation is. It's very important that the local community, their perspective on the kind of translation that they needed should be prioritized. Yes, there was a minority of local people who wanted a more literal translation. However, they did have access to such a translation in the language of wider communication. So basically, they had already what they wanted, but not in their own language. But still, they had access to a more literal translation. Also, we had to discuss the issue that providing a literal translation is not necessarily the same as providing a faithful translation, because literal translations can give the wrong meaning. So this, we also had to discuss the issue that clarity, beauty, naturalness, and acceptability intend to support accuracy, not to suppress it, even though there can be cases where there may be a conflict of interest between those principles. But in principle, those other principles, they are there to support accuracy. Also, translating the Bible into Papuan languages with many lexical gaps, very complex word morphology, and unique discourse patterns is significantly different from translating the Bible into Indo-European languages like English or Dutch, or Austronesian languages like Indonesian. Based on these considerations, the various stakeholders came to the conclusion that Bible translation serves the higher purpose of spiritual formation. Different contexts may require different kinds of translations. A functional equivalent translation strategy was most in line with what the Una people needed, and accuracy of translation should be maintained as the overall goal of the translation. We avoided abstract theoretical discussion about translation principles. What we did is we discussed practical translation issues, we described the limitations, and involved the stakeholders, both in the Netherlands and in Indonesia, asking them, how would you solve this problem? Okay, in light of the limitations that we have, both linguistic limitations like lexical gaps. If there's no word for king, how do you translate king, etc. We also avoided giving the wrong impression that Unapipa was a literal translation comparable to the King James and Dutch Statenvertaling. We did tell them that the Hebrew text and the Greek text were the normative source text. So there are lessons learned. Local ownership and the needs of the local community need to be prioritized. So there was a need for mutual clarification of expressed values and concerns. The concerns of the other stakeholders were they were taken into consideration. They were very much concerned about accuracy. So we had discussions about what is accuracy, and we talked about those in very specific terms, discussing very specific translation issues. Dialogue between stakeholders was needed since there was no clear initial consensus among the major stakeholders. And translators and consultants needed to play a mediating role between various stakeholders in a translation project. Also, transparency, trust, and truthfulness were important values in the process of dialogue and mutual clarification. And I think this is a good point to stop, even though this is not the end of my presentation. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dick. Any questions or comments on Dick's paper?
Thanks, Dick. Look forward to reading the paper. I know you had to run through that quickly. I've noticed throughout the conference that Andrew Chesterman has been cited as like some type of guru of ethics and translation. Can you say a few more words about who this person is for us? And then if there are other people that you would point us towards to help build out some of our thinking about ethics in the translation studies world. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew Chesterman. Okay, well, the main thing I know that, okay, he has experience as a translator, and he is, I mean, he has thought about ethics. I mean, and the way he describes it, he tries not to say we need to do this and that, but he tries to be descriptive. I mean, that's the thing I like. Yes, ethics is about, okay, what are the things, what are good, what are best practices? At the same time, we need to step back and say, so what are the underlying principles and guidelines? So I really like the way he actually approached this. I have read a number of his articles, and but I'm not sure if I can give you a lot of other information. Lawrence Venuti would be another one to really think about. Also in my paper, I mentioned there is some additional literature. There are some newer books on the ethics of translation, or I mean the return of translation. But I think Chesterman. Okay, and then also we have Anthony Pym, who was the editor of the book that Chesterman wrote the article in. So those are the three main names that come to mind, but there are other people who are also very much involved in thinking about the ethics of translation. Yeah.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Dick, for your presentation and for including this particular case study, which provides a good model for us all. So thank you for that. I look forward to actually reading the other three case studies in your paper. My question is, do you have a slide at the end of your presentation, maybe that lists a summary of your conclusions, of your points that you, general principles? If you could just either show those or just briefly comment on your concluding points following your case study, just briefly.
So the main conclusion is that the role of outside not necessarily outside consultants, but I mean facilitators and consultants, is to mediate. It's not just to train, but sometimes communities need an outsider to actually help them to connect and to think about the issues that are at stake. So trying to facilitate a discussion about, okay, especially when there are differences in okay, how they think about accuracy or naturalness. So try to involve the local people as much as possible, the pastors, the professors at the seminary, but then also the sponsors in the Netherlands. So trying to mediate and to be transparent about, okay, this is what we're doing, even though you know that they may disagree, and try to facilitate a discussion on, okay, what is accuracy in this particular case, not in general, because I mean, it's like theology. If you discuss a specific theological issue like the Trinity, so everyone may have different perspectives. However, if you go to very specific issues, then there may be a lot of consensus. So try to give them very specific cases. Okay, and what is your perspective on this? And so from that, go to think about what is accuracy, what is clarity, what is naturalness, and how do they work together. So try to build a common understanding. And so that's why I am advocating a ethics of mediation and dialogue. We need to dialogue. It's not a matter of me or someone else telling, this is the final word, this is what you should do. But we need to discuss, especially if there are differences of perspective. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no. Could you just flip to the next slide, your guiding principles? You don't need to comment on it, just leave it there. We can read it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. One more question.
There wasn't in your presentation, but I looked at your paper and you're raising the question of how ethical it is to require experience for translation consultants. And I would like to hear your opinion there.
Yeah, thank you. Right, so my personal view is that in training new consultants, we need to have competencies like, okay, these are the competencies that they need to fulfill in order to be accepted as a new consultant. From my perspective, okay, my personal perspective, it does not matter if they have 1 year of experience or 20 years. If they are able to actually fulfill those requirements, then they should be accepted. From my perspective, there's no need to have an additional, like they need to have experience of 2 years, because experience, I mean, some people after 20 years, they have not learned anything. And it's like maybe they are comparable to having had experience of 1 or 2 years. So it's no guarantee if you have 25 years of experience, if you have been turning around in your own thinking for 25 years and have not learned anything, actually 25 years of experience is equivalent to maybe 1 or 2 years. So we need to talk about competencies, and we need to translate experience into competencies. And so my perspective is there's no need for an additional requirement of having done 1 or 2 years of experience. Yes, I agree. Having additional experience will help you learn more about it if you are open-minded and if you are learning more new things. However, this is an issue where different people have different perspectives, and I expect that, and I respect that. So in the meantime, it is very important to be transparent about what is our policy. If we want to add experience, like 1 or 2 years in addition to the competencies, okay, that is your decision. However, it's very important to have this dialogue, like, is there a way that we can translate experience in competencies, and let's make those competencies explicit. And if people are able to do it and to demonstrate that they are competent, okay, let's make them consultants and not wait until they have additional 1 or 2 years before they can be accepted. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Thank you very much. I know there are still more questions in the room, so please meet Dick afterwards in the break or some other time. Thank you very much, Dick. That was very interesting.
Thank you.